So first of all, I would say to you, you have a message that is so valuable that somebody else needs to hear. I want you just to understand that. The message that you have put into your book, the message behind the book, the journey even behind that book, somebody somewhere needs to hear from you, because it's not necessarily just about the things that you've done, but it's the story behind what you have done, because that story is going to connect with somebody else somewhere in the world that's going to say, man, that's my person. That's my people. I need to connect with them. I need to buy that book because they really get me. They understand me. And that is the power behind your story. That's the power of your story. And so somebody somewhere needs to hear your story. And podcasting is so unique in that you can speak to people all over the world. It's an opportunity for you to have a one-on-one conversation, so to speak, with somebody else that is really looking for what you have to offer. And you may not see it that way, but I know that to be true because that's how I got started in podcasting. It's because the power of somebody else's message and story. And I didn't even know I needed her message and her story. But when I heard it, it resonated with me and it impacted my life to the point where it's now why I'm so passionate about helping other people to share their message.
Everyone, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. I have someone here today that I've been excited to talk to for a while. This person in particular has been sending me some of the best authors I've had on the show. And every one of them that have come on through my guest today has praised this person up and down, left and right, telling me how amazing this person is. And I am thrilled to have Sabrina on my podcast today. We are going to be chatting about all things to do with getting booked on podcasts and all the great things about finding your voice on a podcast. And Sabrina's here with me today. We're going to be talking about her website as well. kcpodcastagency.com is the website, and Sabrina's here to chat about the process of getting yourself on a podcast, and Sabrina can help you do that. Welcome, Sabrina, to the podcast. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much, Dave, for having me. I am thrilled to be here. And thank you for being such a gracious host and allowing the clients that we have sent to you to be on the podcast and just for the opportunity. Because I can tell that you really help them to kind of dig those treasures out that are already in there, and you highlight them so beautifully. And I think I really appreciate that.
So the one thing I can't figure out, Sabrina, I don't know how we connected originally, how you found the podcast. I have no idea how this happened. And if you can fill me in, because I'm racking my brain. I have no idea how we made our connection and how my first guest through your agency actually came to Living the Next Chapter. Do you have any idea how this happened?
So I do a lot of research. I spend a lot of time researching and digging and diving and finding new podcasts. And so because this year we have been serving so many authors, I have been looking for good quality podcasts. And so I started with a Google search, honestly, to find out what are the podcasts that feature many different authors, because we've been serving authors of different types of genres this year. And so that's really how I came across your podcast, was starting with the Google search. And
Wow.
you ended up coming up in there. And then the unique thing that I found out about you is that I could actually connect my clients with you directly through your booking link so that you could get to know them first. And that's really unique about your podcast, because there's very few, if any, that really do that. There's only like a handful that I know of that'll allow you just to schedule that call without actually contacting someone first and having that initial introduction, but you have that link. And so I was like, okay, I need to find out more about this podcast to see if this is a good fit. And when I realized it was, I was like, we are scheduling these calls.
Okay. Well, see, that's good information for me. And for those listening, if you're a host of a podcast, make it super easy for someone like Sabrina to actually get in touch with you and start sending you people. Don't make it hard. Make it easy for people to connect with you on your website. So
yes, have a process, and you
wow.
have a process, and that initial, setting up that initial intro call is part of your process. And I think that does make it easy for people to be able to send you quality guests as well, because you make that so easy.
Okay, so that you've solved the riddle for me. Thank you. So Sabrina, let's talk about your company. Let's talk about your business and start off at the beginning. The name of your business again, and maybe a little history around how this all started for you and what you do for authors.
Yeah, so thank you for allowing me to share. So we are Kingdom Connections podcast and media agency. And so the podcast really is because that's where it all started, was with podcasting. And then media is because I know that we're going to grow and expand into other media outlets, but podcasting is really our primary outlet. And so it started back in the fall of 2020. So I left the profession of teaching in that same year, in the spring, just before COVID, actually,
Wow.
because I wanted to just be home with my family. I have 4 children, married, and 3 of our kiddos still live at home. And so I left teaching really just to stay home. And the Lord actually led me to start a business. I had no intention of starting any kind of business at that time. I just thought maybe I'll make some extra money. Maybe I can watch kids. Maybe I can do some tutoring. Again, all related to taking care of children, because that's what I've done for like 7 years, is teach. And so I started a virtual assistant business, actually. So just helping people with administrative type stuff on the computer, which I knew how to do because I had to be organized in school. I had to manage a calendar, etc. So my first client that I took on was for that virtual assistant business, and that was in the fall of 2020. So this lady quickly became a good friend of mine, and she really just started sharing more about her life with me and just kind of some of the things that she had walked through. And her testimony, just parts of her life, were really very impactful for me as a believer. And I felt like some of the things that she was sharing, other people needed to hear. And so I just asked her one day, I was like, I think you need to be speaking. I think you need to be sharing, what you've shared with me, you need to share with other people. And she just came back and she was like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to be doing that. And so I don't know. I feel like I didn't know what I was asking her, but I was like, can I help you to do that? Like, can I help you to get out there and speak? And she said, sure. And then immediately after, like in my head, I'm going, what did I just offer? I have no idea. I have no idea how to get somebody booked on speaking or anything. But from there, I just, honestly, I was just like, Lord, what am I doing? What did I just offer? And I started Googling, like, how do people get on speaking? Like, where are they speaking? And that's when I discovered podcasts. So I didn't even know what a podcast was until then. And so it really just started with a Google search and praying and asking the Lord for direction with the business. And then she shared with a friend of hers what I was doing for her. And that friend came and asked, like, can I pay you to do this for me too? Can I pay you to book me on podcast? And I was like, okay, but just know, like, I still don't know what I'm doing. I'm just figuring this out. And so from there, it really just grew through referrals. They would share what I was doing with somebody else, and just been learning along the way.
That's amazing. Okay, let's start off. I have a question right off the bat. As a host of a podcast, interview-based podcast, Living the Next Chapter, I'm always looking for suggestions from people outside of podcasting, like not actually a podcaster, but people that work along with podcasters like you do. What kind of tips can you share with me and with other podcast hosts listening that do interviews? What makes a good interview? What makes a good podcast? Something that stands out to you in what you do. How can we serve you and your clients better as podcast hosts?
Wow, thank you. That's a good question, and I appreciate that. I think the first thing I think about is the pre-work that goes into it. And so when a podcast host or when a podcast already has some sort of guesting process set
Okay.
up, that makes it super easy for me because I can go to wherever their podcast is hosted. So maybe you have a Facebook page, maybe you have a website. So like for you, you had a website, and I could clearly see this is how he receives guests. Or maybe you don't want people to send you guests. Maybe your guesting process is through personal connections only. But what happens is when you are clear about how you receive guests or how you bring people on, it lets me know how can I serve you in the way that honors you best. Like how can I help
Okay.
you? So having that guesting process in place is really super helpful.
Okay.
The second thing that I think about is allowing the other person to know this is what the process looks like. So not only can you schedule the call, but this is what to expect from me as a host, and this is what I expect from you as a guest. I'm going to provide you with this awesome opportunity to be on my podcast, to share with my audience. And then when we're done, I expect you to do XYZ. Probably you want them to share and promote the episode. And some people think maybe that shouldn't even be like in the expectations, but I think it should be because
Hmm.
honestly, not everybody is honoring as a guest. Like not everyone knows to promote and share. And so
Right.
telling them once we've recorded, this is what you can expect. I'm going to send you a graphic. I'm going to send you an air date. So let them know this is when your episode is going to be aired so that they
Yeah.
can promote it. Be sure and tag me when you share it on social media, those
Yeah.
kinds of things. So having that process in place and then setting up the expectations as well. I think those are some great ways that we can work together and that we can serve one another better.
Okay. So a new author comes to you. You're going to be onboarding them into to working with you. You're going to help place them on podcasts and give them opportunities. Um, talk me through what that conversation sounds like when you're meeting with somebody for the first time. They've never been on a podcast before. They've never done any of this. They have a new book. They're ready to go out and share it with the world. Their first step is to talk to you. What kind of things are you telling them about podcasting in particular, about guesting? What kind of things do you tell them to prepare them before they go out and go on their first podcast?
Well, first of all, I really want to make sure that they have a clear message. So I have an acronym that I use, and it's called MAP: Message, Audience, and Purpose. And so I want
Okay.
to make sure that they are clear in those areas. They know what they're going to go talk about. They know what they want to share. They know who they're speaking to, and they know what the purpose is for being on a podcast. And I know for authors, some people might say, well, the purpose is to share my book, is to promote my book. But some authors that have come to us, their purpose is not necessarily just to sell books, but there is a message that they're trying to get out there. And so that really comes into play with who am I going to reach out to based on their purpose? Is it just to sell books?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes an author doesn't know all of those things. And so that's why we need to get very clear in the very beginning is to know the message, the audience, and the purpose. And then also, do they even understand the value that they bring? Like,
Yeah.
do they understand that they are the expert or that they have something to give, they have something to provide? And then in order to prepare for these interviews, I always say, I need you to go and listen to these podcasts. I need you to listen to an episode or two so that you can get a feel for what the conversation is going to sound like. And again, you wouldn't think that maybe this would be an expectation, but I think it's important to be so clear as to what is expected. And so it's expected that they go and they listen to the podcast and that they also find out a little bit about the host as well.
Yeah.
So we provide our authors with the background information, but they still have their part to do, which again is to listen so that they're prepared for the interview and know going into it, like what is their angle, what is it that they're going to be speaking about. And we give them, again, some of that information up front, but depending on the host, it may be an unscripted, right? It may be something where you
Right.
don't get questions, but
Yeah.
just knowing going into it, they're going to ask you things related to things you already know. So making sure they're feeling confident about going on there. You're not going to be asked things that are not already a part of what you've been doing or the message that you share. They're going to be things that you know. And so making sure that they feel confident going into that interview.
Okay. Because one thing I've noticed is some of the authors you've sent me, some of them have never been on a podcast before. And I usually find out during the podcast that they've never been on a show. It's not one of the questions I ask everyone, but I'm like, you're doing so well. Like you've done this forever. And they're like, this is my first time I've ever been on a show. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm like, you sound great. You're doing awesome. So I love building up my guest as well, is giving them a great experience on a podcast so they do more of these. Because I really think that for authors in particular, to have something that lives out there as kind of a chance for people to find you, to find out more about your book, to get to know you as an author beyond what they read on your bio. They get to hear your voice, your passion, the story behind the book, and who you are as a person. That lives out there for a long, long time.
It does.
And people are going to find your episode a year, 5 years from now, and fall in love with you and what you do just based on an interview. So It's not like a radio show. If you're not listening when the recording happens, you missed it. Right. This lives on long after the interview, which I really like. And I just want to give every guest that comes on the show a great experience so that they walk away from this going, that was a good use of my time. Because from my perspective, I guess coming on a show, you're giving your time, and I'm asking to meet with you twice, once for a pre-interview and then to come on the show. So I know I'm asking a lot of my guests. So I feel like it's my job to give my best to my guest. So from the feedback from some of the people that have come through you to my show, is there anything that you're learning from their feedback that could help this podcast or other podcasters to do their best for their guests?
Yeah. So I think what maybe you don't understand as a host, Dave, is that part of the reason that those experiences are so good is because you have taken the time to prepare. Like I could tell listening to the interviews that you did with the people that I had sent that you didn't go into it blind, but you had actually taken the time to look into their book, to look into them as a person. And it sounded like a very natural conversation that you were having.
Okay.
So I think that is the key right there is, as a host, are you prepared, right? Like, or have you just kind of looked over somebody's website and you're just going into it hoping to pull out some things? But I feel like you were very purposeful about the way that you move through the conversation. They said, you were a very gracious host, like so easy to talk to. And they felt very comfortable. And I think that's why the interviews went so well, is because you made them feel comfortable and confident in what they had to bring, because you obviously had looked into who they are and the books that they've written. And I think that's so important. And not everybody does that as a host.
Yeah. And I think from my perspective, I'm just naturally a very curious person, and I'm not an author. So I tell everybody that comes on when I do my pre-interview that in this recording, you're the expert. I'm not. I feel like in this podcast in particular, I'm more of an audience member with a microphone.
Yeah.
So I ask a question and then I blend into the crowd because you're the star of the show and I haven't done what you've done. So I tell everyone, it's not bragging if you've done it. You've done it. You are now a published author, and I'm not. So I'm so happy to talk to you. You've done something I haven't done. So I'm just curious. I want to know everything about the process. I want to learn from you. And I know when they look at me, they're like, this is my first interview, and I only have one book. And I keep saying to them, listen, you've done something that many people dream of doing.
Yeah.
So we're here to celebrate you. And you can see them just kind of like their shoulders drop a little bit. They seem a little more relaxed because it's like, And I get the question, are you going to send me my list of questions? And I say no, because generally I'm working from a blank piece of paper myself. I don't have any questions for you written down. I'm listening to you and following the conversation as you lead me in this
Yes.
podcast.
And then
right?
that curious nature that you have naturally leads to digging and diving in and bringing out those things, because you're just asking the question as the conversation moves along. And I think that's what's so cool about what you do, because the curiousness about
Yeah.
you brings out those things in the guest.
Because they'll say something, and then I'm like, wait a minute. What did you just say?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, this. And I'm like, well, okay, we didn't talk about that. Can you go, what's that about? And you can see them like, oh, I've really never talked about this part before. Okay. And what's exciting for me is I feel like I'm speaking on behalf of their community, who also wants to know the story behind that story.
Yes.
And like, oh, good, Dave asked the question that I was hoping he would ask.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that story. I don't know how that happened, right? Like little things like, tell me what it felt like to open that box of books that arrived on your doorstep for the very first time. You've come to the point in your writing career that you actually have the book in your hand for the very first time. Take me there.
Yeah.
What day was that? What time of day? What was the weather like? Tell me what happened that day when the doorbell rang, and take us through that. We want to feel that, because I'm thinking on behalf of the authors that haven't started writing yet, to dream for that day and live that day through you as a guest, and now inspire that person to go, I want to feel that. I want that doorbell to ring. I want to see the box on my front step. I want that. So now I'm envisioning that for me as a new author, and I want to answer that question one day. Right?
Yeah. And I think for you as a host, and if somebody's listening and they're also a host, you're a good listener. That's what it is. Like, you need to be able to really listen to the person that you're interviewing. And that's how you're able to pull those things out, because you are listening. You're not focused on this, let's move through these questions. Right?
Yeah.
You're being a good listener. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's a key right there. Just listen to the other person, because you never know, even if you do have some questions to guide you, because I get it. Sometimes we're so nervous that we want to make sure that we're moving things along, but sometimes the best interviews are those that are unscripted, and you're listening and you're pulling out those nuggets and those treasures for someone on the other side to hear, to be, like you said, encouraged and inspired. And so I think that's so good.
One of the little tricks I like to do, and we talk about this in the pre-interview, is I'll say to my guest, so when we're doing the recording, I'm going to ask you the same questions again, but I want you to answer them as if you've never told me the answer before. And I don't want you to go, Dave, I already answered this question. Why weren't you paying attention when we met first time? Like, why are you asking me this again? Our audience wasn't here with us, so I don't want to leave them out, right? But I'm gonna ask you a question during the interview and our time together, and I don't want you to talk through me to the audience. I want you to talk to the audience directly, as if I'm not even here. So I'm going to ask you a question about what you've done, or what your book is about, what your topic is, who you are. But instead of talking to me, I want you to talk to them. This person that's here with us. What would you say to them directly? And I want you to talk to them. And in that moment, you are now the host of the podcast, and I'm just in the audience. So it's your podcast right now. And what would you say to this person who's listening, who is just like you, who struggles the way you have struggled as an author? What would you say to them?
Yeah. And that's something that we
speak to them directly. Yeah.
That is something that we tell people that are going to be a guest, is who is your audience? Who are you speaking to? And you're helping them to envision and remind them, you're speaking to your people. These are your people. What do you want to say to them? And I think that's great as a host, because we are speaking to our audience, and we need to remember, like, who are those people that you're supposed to be speaking to. So that's good.
Yeah, and one of the other things I like to do is I pull up the reviews of their book on Amazon or something while we're talking, and then I start reading to them. Well, first I ask them the question, how important are reviews to you? And if they say not at all, then I skip this part. But if they're like, no, it's really important to me, I read every review, then I say, okay, well, Sabrina, let's read some reviews from your latest book. And I start reading them. 5-star review from Dave Campbell. He says, blah, 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 blah. What do you think of that? And now you get to talk to the person who left you a review as the author, and you get to speak back to them. Like, and you can see them kind of like, oh, because they're hearing the words, they're hearing the reviews out loud that they've read in the past, but now we get them in the recording and we get to celebrate. And what I'm doing there is I'm trying to encourage readers and other authors to leave great reviews, not just great book, great author, but let's get some detail, because it really means something to our authors to read those reviews.
Yeah, I thought that was a really, really nice touch when I was listening to your interviews and you were reading somebody else's reviews. I thought, wow, how encouraging is that to the author that is sitting there and they're listening to somebody else's words about their piece of work. And reviews help other people to find your books as well. So you're furthering the message in the book when you leave a review.
Yeah, it's amazing. Any other tips for guests? Being a guest on a podcast? Anything else stand out that we haven't chatted about so far that you're like, I would definitely tell any future guest, make sure you do A, B, or C?
Honestly, I think one of the biggest things that you can do is to prepare. Like, I think a lot of times we get so caught up in numbers, like how many podcasts can I be on? How many interviews can I book this month? That you're forgetting to really be prepared and thoughtful about each and every opportunity that you're going on. Don't schedule so many things that you're not able to honor the other person on the other side, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so there's a lot that goes into preparing, but I mean, just in that, be thoughtful. And how can you honor the time and the host and the audience? How can you be honoring to them? Be prepared and take the time to do that. Don't get so caught up in making so many connections that you forget you're connecting with real people.
Right.
And you need to be mindful of that.
Yeah. There's a saying I remember someone said a long time ago to me was, wherever you are, be all there.
Ooh.
And that's in our meetings,
exactly
in
right.
our time together,
yes,
in our relationships with our children, our partners, wherever you are, be all there. I just love that that's a great way to approach life. It's how I do my podcasts. I'm not distracted by my phone or what I'm going to eat for lunch today. Like, I'm here with you. I want to focus on our conversation, right?
I think that sums it up very well. Be all there. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. So, okay, talk about the people that you bring into your fold, who you serve. Let's describe that person, because I know they're listening. This specific person that you work with is looking for someone exactly like you. They're looking for you. And I want to connect you with that person listening, because I've had authors reach out to me and they're like, Dave, if you ever find someone that does what you do, Sabrina, that I'm looking for them and I need to meet them. So this is your opportunity, like I said before, for me to move out of the way. And I would love for you to hijack my podcast and talk directly to that person that you serve. Tell them who you serve and give me like a brief onboarding of that person. And I'm just going to get out of the way. I would love to kind of give you the opportunity to do that. So speak to that person, that new author, and describe your ideal client that would work with you.
Yes, thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate that. So we serve women who are Christian authors, coaches, speakers. Usually they have a business, but not always. Sometimes they have written a book, but not always. So when I say Christian authors, coaches, speakers, sometimes they're all of the above. But today I know that I am speaking to primarily to the authors, or maybe even potential authors. And so we do serve a lot of authors. They are usually women. They typically have a message behind the book. So the book is part of their message, but it's not the only way that they share their message. It's something that they are passionate about. Usually they have written books that are nonfiction that ties into that underlying message that they're passionate about sharing. And they come to us because perhaps they've just launched the book and they're like, now what? Like,
Yeah.
now what I do with this thing, because I've spent so much time and effort into putting in this to launching this book, and now I don't understand, why is it not just flying off the shelf? Like, why am I not selling this thing already? And it's because the work doesn't stop when you publish the book. There's this other leg of the race, so to speak, that you
Yeah.
step into, and that's stewarding the message, stewarding the book, or the message behind the book. And so that's where we come in, because they're just like, I don't know where to take it from here. And podcasting is such a great way for you to get your message, to get your book out there in front of more of your people, rather than just on social media, because social media is a great place as well. But what podcasting does is two things. It allows you to target more of your people, and then it's evergreen. The episode is out there, like you have said, like
Yeah.
it's out there. It's everywhere. You're reaching so many people that you may never encounter on your own through social media. But then you can take that episode and you can turn it into so many different things, to
Right.
create content, to write a blog, to repurpose and reshare with your audience. And then you're able to reach so many more people. And so when the authors come to us, I feel like that's where they are. They're like, I need help with getting this message out to more people. And so we ask them some of those questions that I had shared with you in the beginning. We ask them, okay, what is your message? Who are your people? And why do you want to get this message out there? Because that really
Mhm.
helps us to know, where can we send them? Because sometimes I feel like they have a twofold message that they don't even realize. So number one, it's the message behind the book. It's whatever it is in that book that they have written. But the second thing is that they're not even realizing they can tap into the audience of potential authors. You've written a book, so
Right.
now, are you willing to help other people write their book too? And
Exactly.
a lot of times authors haven't thought about that. They're like, well, yeah, I would be willing to help somebody else too. And so that's an untapped audience. So number one, it's their people that they're reaching through the book, but then it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I know about this journey and I know about the process of writing a book. And so then we get to tap into that audience. And through that audience, you never know, they may be the people that also want to buy their book, because you get to
Hmm.
share not only about the process, but then you get to share about your book and the content of that. And then you find that your audience is over there too. They're not just in this
Right.
one particular, so it like broadens, I feel like, your reach. Um,
Right.
so that's kind of a little bit about how we get started. We get started
Okay.
with whatever it is that they're bringing to the table, and then we're able to find their people that they can speak to. And then, of course, we provide them with the things that they need in order to go on to that interview and to be successful. We try to provide them with a little bit of background information about the host, the
Yeah.
podcast. They do their part. And then, really, it's their time to shine. Like, we want them to just be able to show up and be who they already are, right?
Right.
Without having to worry about um, doing all of the legwork. We take care of all of that part of it. So I feel like that's kind of an overview um,
Okay.
of what it looks like.
So how long would you work with a particular author, for example? What's the time span from they start with you and then they move on to the next thing? How long would you work with them?
So typically, it's 6 months,
Oh,
and
wow.
so we really say that it's more of a long term commitment, because podcasting in general is not a short term, right now
Right.
thing. It's a
Yeah.
long term branding strategy. It's a long term strategy of getting your message out there, because some things that people don't understand, that have never been a guest, is that sometimes it's not as simple as, I'm going to reach out, I'm going to be a guest, and then, within a week or so, my episode's going to be out. Like, it's just boom, boom, boom. It doesn't really work that way typically.
Right.
Now, if you do find that there are new podcasts that are so eager to find guests because they're constantly releasing episodes, then it might be something where you connect, you interview, and within that same month, your episode is out, but not usually. And
Yeah.
also, if you're going for those bigger platforms, the ones that book guests months in advance, then you have to be willing to commit to at least 6 months, because those things just take time. They take time to book. It takes time to find the podcast. It takes time to reach out, and just to go through that process. So that's why we say 6 months, because it's not just an overnight quick thing that you get into and then you release all these episodes.
Right. So I'm on your website again, kcpodcastagency.com. And I notice you have a free consultation as well. Can you tell us what happens when we sign up for a free consult with you?
Yes. So we want to take that time. We do ask for the person on the other side to provide us with some information so that we can kind of go digging and diving into them. But we use that opportunity to really find out more about what you can't just read from their website, like really get to know that person and what they're looking to do, they're looking to gain through podcasting. And then to be able to assess, like, is this the right time? Is this the right fit for them to partner with us? Or are there some things that we can provide to them to where they can do some behind the scenes work in order to get ready to be on a podcast? Because sometimes people will come to us and they're just like, I just want to get on a podcast. I want to speak to everybody. I just want to share. And sometimes that's not the right time. That's not the right place, because you really don't know who you're going to speak to. You just want to get out there. And I don't know if you've ever heard, like, when you want to speak to everybody, you end up speaking to nobody.
To nobody, right.
Yeah, because you're just talking to everybody and they don't really know who you're speaking to. They don't know how they can connect with you because you just want to talk to everybody. And so we find that if you're in that place, then you really need to take some time to think about really why you want to go on podcasts and who you want to speak to. And we have a resource that we give to potential clients that kind of helps them to narrow down their message, their audience, and their purpose. And so we might provide them with that resource and then offer for them to come back to us. And so it's just a time to really get to assess where they are, where they want to go, and how can we help them to get there.
It's amazing. And then you also you help people with their branding as well, which I find that to be unique. That's a great compliment to helping them with guesting, but talk a little bit more about the branding component as well.
Yes. So the branding part really comes into that work up front, like helping them to hone in on their message, their audience, and their purpose, and to get really clear about that. Because once they start guesting on these different podcasts, then they become known for these certain specific speaking topics. They become known as the go-to for XYZ, whatever that may be for them. And so that long-term branding strategy through podcast guesting is helping them to find those podcasts that are the right fit for them, and then utilizing those episodes, sharing those so that they are then being known as the go-to person for this topic, or the person that you want to go to for this topic. But it's really that all encompassing, I know who I am, I know what I'm called to share, and then utilizing those episodes to say, hey, look, do you need somebody for this area? Listen to what I had to say on this podcast about this topic.
Yeah. Excellent. It's great. I love having you on, Sabrina. This is exactly what I was hoping our conversation would be today.
I'm so glad to hear that. This has been so much fun.
It's really good. It's really good. So again, a new author, they're not really sure if they should go on podcasts as a guest as part of their promotion strategy once their book is launched. I need you to convince them, Sabrina, that this is a good idea to go on a podcast. Come on, one big last push. Talk to that author that's like, I don't know, Sabrina, I'm not really feeling it. I've never been on a podcast. I never listen to podcasts. I don't see the value. I need you to convince them for me. Please. I need more guests. So tell them again, why is this important for your brand and for your book?
So first of all, I would say to you, you have a message that is so valuable that somebody else needs to hear. I want you just to understand that. The message that you have put into your book, the message behind the book, the journey even behind that book, somebody somewhere needs to hear from you, because it's not necessarily just about the things that you've done, but it's the story behind what you have done, because that story is going to connect with somebody else somewhere in the world that's going to say, man, that's my person. That's my people. I need to connect with them. I need to buy that book because they really get me. They understand me. And that is the power behind your story. That's the power of your story. And so somebody somewhere needs to hear your story. And podcasting is so unique in that you can speak to people all over the world. It's an opportunity for you to have a one-on-one conversation, so to speak, with somebody else that is really looking for what you have to offer. And you may not see it that way, but I know that to be true because that's how I got started in podcasting. It's because the power of somebody else's message and story. And I didn't even know I needed her message and her story. But when I heard it, it resonated with me and it impacted my life to the point where it's now why I'm so passionate about helping other people to share their message.
I love it. Okay, again, promote, Sabrina. Where do we go? I've been mentioning the website while we've been chatting, but where do we go? And also, where are you most active on social media for people to connect with you and to sign up and come and pay you lots of money because you're going to help them with everything? Where do we go?
So I am most active on Facebook. And I'm just really personal. So yes, you can go to my website, kcpodcastagency.com, but you can just reach out to me directly on Facebook, Sabrina Hammonds. You can also find KC Podcast Agency on Facebook. But again, I'm super personal, so I am totally open to new connections. Even if it's not the right time or the right fit, I have other connections for people. And so even if I can't help you because I'm not the person, I might know somebody who can. And I would love just to be able to connect with you and to connect you with people who can help you in the journey.
Nice. I love it. That's spectacular. And everybody you've sent to me so far, again, all gold standard, amazing guests, super amazing authors, beautiful people who have amazing stories. And for me to have a moment of their time and to be a small part of their promotion package of getting their words out and getting their book out into the world, I love it. So keep sending me these great people. Anytime an email comes in from you, it goes straight to the top of the list. So I've had some other agencies, unnamed agencies, reach out to me in the past. They don't know my show. They don't know my audience. They try to pitch people who they don't even have a book and they're not even authors. And I'm like, why are you sending me this person? They're like, well, you have a podcast. So no, I love that you take your time and you put some effort into it from your perspective, because it really helps me as a host. And if you're a host of a podcast and this fits with your theme of your show, you definitely need to speak to Sabrina because she is amazing. So thank you for all of the great people again. Thank you for making time for me. And I just want to encourage you to keep going. You have a gift for connecting people. And I just want to encourage you to keep going. Thank you for all the things you've done so far.
Thank you so much, Dave. This has been like so much fun. And I feel like you're such a champion of other people that I am just like bursting, like feeling like, okay, let's go out and conquer the world now because I feel so full. So just thank you so much for being such a gracious host. And for cheering me on because I feel so encouraged today.
Okay, well, that's exactly what I was hoping for. Everyone, please go check the show notes. Head over to the website. Track Sabrina down on Facebook. Give her lots of love and lots of compliments as well for all the great guests she sent. And to all your authors that have listening that are like, this is Sabrina, she's on the show. Thank you to all of you for picking Sabrina and being on my show as well.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for being part of the podcast again. Appreciate you investing time in the show and you for listening this far. Thank you. One thing to keep in mind is we are looking for help and some support for the podcast. If you are able to help support our show, our little podcast show here, we can go over to livingthenextchapter.com and all the instructions will be there to help support the show. It takes about $30 to $40 a month. to do this, just for the hosting and all of that other stuff that we pay for. But if the show is giving you any value and you're enjoying what's happening here, would love any kind of support that you can offer. That would be great. And you being here and sharing the show helps us grow. Helps us get great new authors on the show, connect with other listeners, and build community. So whatever you can do to share this show today, I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here for Living the Next Chapter, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. Talk soon. Have a great day.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.